Welcome to episode 12 of Workplace English Masterclass. When you hear the word negotiation, you might think of business deals worth millions of dollars. But negotiation happens much more often than you might realize. You negotiate deadlines with your manager. You negotiate responsibilities with your colleagues. You negotiate project expectations with clients. In fact, negotiation is one of the most valuable workplace communication skills you can develop. Successful negotiation is not about winning an argument or getting everything you want. It's about understanding different perspectives, communicating respectfully, and finding solutions that benefit everyone involved. In today's lesson, you'll learn practical English phrases that professionals use to negotiate confidently, make proposals, respond diplomatically, and reach successful agreements. By the end of this lesson, you'll feel more confident handling workplace negotiations with professionalism and respect. Let's get started. Before we learn the phrases, let's understand why negotiation is such an important workplace skill. The first benefit is reaching better agreements. Good negotiators focus on finding solutions that meet the needs of everyone involved, rather than trying to win at someone else's expense. The second benefit is building trust. Professional negotiations are based on honesty, respect, and open communication. When people feel respected during discussions, trust naturally grows. The third benefit is solving problems collaboratively. Negotiation encourages people to work together instead of against one another. By sharing ideas and exploring different options, teams often discover better solutions than either person originally imagined. The fourth benefit is creating win-win outcomes. The best negotiations are those where everyone leaves feeling that their concerns have been considered and respected. The final benefit is strengthening professional relationships. Successful negotiations don't just solve today's problem. They build stronger working relationships that make future collaboration easier. For these reasons, negotiation is an essential skill for professionals at every level of an organization. Let's begin with some useful phrases for starting a negotiation professionally. The first phrase is, "I'd like to discuss." This phrase introduces a topic politely and professionally. For example, "I'd like to discuss the project timeline." It signals that you're inviting a conversation rather than making a demand. The second phrase is, "Let's explore our options." This phrase encourages collaboration and shows that you're open to different possibilities. For example, "Let's explore our options before making a final decision." This creates a positive and solution-focused atmosphere. The third phrase is, "I'd like to understand your priorities." Strong negotiators don't begin by talking about themselves. They first try to understand what matters most to the other person. For example, "I'd like to understand your priorities so we can find the best solution." Let's see what works best. This phrase reinforces teamwork and flexibility. For example, "Let's see what works best for both teams." These opening phrases help establish a respectful and cooperative tone, making it easier to have productive negotiations. Now let's explore how to make a proposal professionally. A proposal is simply a suggestion or recommendation for moving forward. The way you present your proposal can greatly influence how others respond. Let's look at some useful phrases. The first phrase is, "I would suggest." This phrase introduces an idea politely and professionally. For example, "I would suggest scheduling the meeting earlier so everyone has enough preparation time." This sounds collaborative rather than forceful. The second phrase is, "One possible solution is." This phrase focuses on solving the problem instead of criticizing it. For example, "One possible solution is to divide the workload equally across the team." Notice that you're offering an option rather than insisting on a single answer. The third phrase is, "Perhaps we could." This phrase is commonly used in business negotiations because it sounds flexible and respectful. For example, "Perhaps we could extend the deadline by 2 days to ensure the highest quality." Using "perhaps" makes the suggestion sound cooperative. What if we... This phrase invites discussion and brainstorming.
For example, what if we schedule 2 shorter meetings instead of 1 long meeting? Questions like this encourage everyone to participate in finding the best solution. The strongest proposals invite collaboration rather than demanding agreement.
Once a proposal has been made, the next step is responding professionally. Even if you don't completely agree, it's important to communicate respectfully. Let's explore some useful phrases. The first phrase is, "That's a reasonable suggestion." This phrase acknowledges the value of the other person's idea. For example, "That's a reasonable suggestion. I think it could work well." Acknowledging positive ideas helps create a cooperative atmosphere. The second phrase is, "I understand your point." This phrase demonstrates active listening. Remember, understanding someone's perspective doesn't always mean you agree with it. It simply shows respect. The third phrase is, "Could we consider?" This phrase introduces an alternative without rejecting the original idea. For example, "Could we consider extending the timeline by 1 week instead?" This keeps the discussion open and constructive. The final phrase is, "I'd be comfortable with that if..." This phrase allows you to express conditions respectfully. For example, "I'd be comfortable with that if we review our progress every Friday." Professional negotiators often look for compromises that address everyone's concerns. Respectful responses help move the conversation towards agreement rather than disagreement. The final stage of negotiation is reaching an agreement. Once both sides have discussed different options, it's important to confirm the outcome clearly. Let's look at some useful phrases. The first phrase is, "I think we've reached an agreement." This phrase signals that both sides have found a solution they can accept. For example, "I think we've reached an agreement on the revised timeline." It helps bring the discussion to a positive conclusion. The second phrase is, "That sounds fair." This phrase shows that you believe the outcome is balanced and reasonable. Fairness is an important part of successful negotiations. The third phrase is, "Let's move forward with this plan." This phrase shifts the conversation from discussion to action. For example, "Let's move forward with this plan and review the results next month." The final phrase is, "I'm happy with this solution." This phrase expresses satisfaction with the outcome. It reassures the other person that the agreement has been accepted positively. Successful negotiations don't end when people stop talking. They end when everyone clearly understands the agreement and is committed to moving forward together. Let's examine our first workplace negotiation scenario. The manager says, "We need to reduce the project budget." This is a common challenge in many organizations. Instead of immediately rejecting the request, the employee responds thoughtfully. The employee says, "Perhaps we could reduce unnecessary expenses instead." Notice how the employee doesn't simply say, "No, that's impossible." Instead, they offer an alternative solution. The phrase, "Perhaps we could," keeps the conversation collaborative and solution-focused. This is one of the key principles of successful negotiation. Rather than focusing on why something can't be done, professional negotiators focus on what can be done. By suggesting a different approach, the employee demonstrates flexibility, creativity, and a willingness to work towards a shared goal. This type of response encourages productive discussion and often leads to better outcomes for everyone involved. Let's look at another workplace negotiation scenario. The client says, "Could you complete this by Friday?" This is a reasonable request, but it may not always be realistic. The consultant responds, "I believe Monday would allow us to deliver a higher quality result." Notice what the consultant does. They don't simply refuse the request. Instead, they explain why they are proposing a different deadline. The focus is not on avoiding the work. The focus is on delivering a better outcome. This is an important negotiation strategy. When suggesting an alternative, always explain the benefit behind your proposal. People are generally more open to compromise when they understand the reasoning. Professional negotiators don't just ask for changes.
They explain how those changes create better results for everyone involved. This approach builds trust and demonstrates professionalism.
Now let's discuss some common negotiation mistakes. The first mistake is demanding instead of discussing. Negotiation should be a conversation, not a competition. When people make demands without listening to others, they often create resistance instead of cooperation. The second mistake is interrupting. Interrupting prevents you from fully understanding the other person's priorities and concerns. Successful negotiators listen carefully before responding. The third mistake is refusing to compromise. Negotiation is rarely about getting everything you want. It's about finding a solution that works for everyone. Now, let's look at the positive alternatives. Listening actively helps you understand the other person's perspective. Staying flexible allows you to explore different possibilities. Looking for win-win solutions helps build trust and strengthens professional relationships. Remember, the goal of negotiation is not to defeat the other person. The goal is to reach an agreement that everyone can support. The best negotiators are not the ones who speak the most. They are the ones who listen well, communicate clearly, and help people move towards a shared solution. Let's now explore some practical tips that can help you become a more confident and effective negotiator. The first tip is prepare beforehand. Successful negotiations often begin long before the conversation starts. Take time to understand the situation, identify your priorities, and think about possible solutions. Preparation helps you communicate with greater confidence and respond more effectively to unexpected questions. The second tip is listen carefully. Negotiation isn't just about explaining your own ideas. It's also about understanding what matters to the other person. The more you listen, the more likely you are to discover opportunities for compromise and collaboration. The third tip is stay respectful. Even when opinions differ, maintaining a respectful tone helps keep the conversation productive. Professional negotiators focus on solving problems rather than proving someone wrong. The fourth tip is focus on shared goals. Instead of concentrating only on your own objectives, identify what both sides are trying to achieve. When people work towards a common goal, reaching an agreement becomes much easier. The final tip is look for mutual benefits. The strongest agreements are those where everyone gains something valuable. Rather than thinking in terms of winning or losing, think about creating solutions that benefit everyone involved. Great negotiators don't simply reach agreements. They build trust, strengthen relationships, and create opportunities for future collaboration. Now it's your turn to practice. Negotiation is a skill that becomes stronger with practice. Let's work through these sentence starters together. The first sentence is, I'd like to discuss. Think about a workplace situation where you would like to begin a professional discussion. For example, I'd like to discuss our project timeline. This opens the conversation politely and professionally. The second sentence is, one possible solution is. This phrase shifts the discussion from identifying problems to finding solutions. For example, one possible solution is to divide the project into smaller stages. Could we consider? This phrase introduces an alternative idea respectfully. For example, could we consider extending the deadline by 2 days? Notice how this sounds collaborative rather than demanding. That sounds fair. This phrase helps confirm agreement. For example, that sounds fair. I think this approach will work well for everyone. Try completing each sentence using examples from your own workplace, studies, business ideas, or everyday situations. The more you practice these phrases, the more confident you'll become when negotiating professionally. Congratulations on completing episode 12 of Workplace English Masterclass. Today, you've learned how to negotiate professionally, make proposals confidently, respond respectfully, and reach successful agreements. Let's briefly review what we've covered.
You learned how to begin negotiations professionally. You learned how to present ideas and proposals clearly. You learned how to respond to suggestions respectfully and diplomatically. And you learned how to reach agreements that benefit everyone involved. And you explored practical strategies that help professionals negotiate with confidence while maintaining positive workplace relationships.
Remember, successful negotiation is not about winning every discussion. It's about understanding different perspectives, communicating respectfully, and finding solutions that create value for everyone. The most effective negotiators are not the loudest people in the room. They are the people who listen carefully, think strategically, and communicate with clarity, confidence, and respect. As you continue developing your workplace communication skills, try applying today's phrases during meetings, project discussions, client conversations, and everyday workplace interactions. With practice, negotiation will become a natural part of your professional communication toolkit. In episode 13, we'll learn how to persuade and influence professionally by presenting ideas in a way that inspires confidence and encourages action. Thank you for learning with Everyday English Treats. I'll see you in the next lesson.